And part of it dwelt on the cost of financing of political parties in Ghana. And there was a proposal for state funding of political parties. And the relation between the funding of political parties and corruption in Ghana. So that was the context. So it's important that we place the issues in their proper context. And indeed, you see, if we are going to deal with our problems comprehensively and not just do politics about it or pretend that we are dealing with them, we need to have an honest conversation, truthful, honest, and sincere. And this is not about NDC or MPP, it's about Ghana. We need to look into ourselves, look at our consciences. We've had this democracy for 26 years or so. Are we satisfied with the returns that we are getting? What are the systemic problems and challenges that we've had? And I started by saying that, look, I have had practical experiences of what it takes to run an election. Every 4 years we go through that cycle. And I asked the audience, do we? And let me also ask you, Daniel, do you have any idea how much it costs every 4 years between the two major parties to run a campaign, even over a 6-month or 1 year period? And I told them, I have a fair idea, but I won't tell them. Because if I told them, they will collapse. And I will also tell you, let our academics do a study and find out how much money we spend every 4 years in running a campaign. So we have created a system where, as of necessity, we have to spend millions, billions of money every 4 years to run an election. That is not, it's not something that was caused by me or by the NDC or the MPP. It was caused by all of us Ghanaians. That is the system we have created.
How did we collectively create that system, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah? For instance, if today politicians were not heavily funding these campaigns, we're not investing so much money in these campaigns, wouldn't the system itself adjust to whatever level or standard that we all decide to run campaigns with?
Daniel, I know you are very smart. Okay. Let's not, for want of a better word, belittle this conversation. We all know what happens. We are in this country. Okay? We see, we know. So let's not even go there.
But why does it have to happen like that, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah? And I respect your candidness in this conversation, but in the spirit of candidness, why does elections have to be so expensive?
Daniel, again, you are too smart. So don't pretend to be naive. Okay? Let me just make my point, and you understand where I'm coming from.
Fair enough.
Because we have to spend to advertise. We have to spend to buy vehicles. We for the vehicles. We have to do media, advertisement, radio, TV, etc., rallies. These are the practical realities. So if we are going to deal with this, and where does the money come from? The money must come from somewhere. Okay? And I said that I've had very close working relationships, very, very close with Professor Mills, very sincere man. I've worked very closely with President Mahama, very sincere. President Kufuor became my friend after he left office. Anytime I talk to him, I realize that he's very sincere. Nanado is also trying, even though he's struggling. And I believe that all these people, former President, they all mean well for this country. They wish they could do more. But if you look at the quantum of money that we spend every 4 years, we need to begin to have an honest conversation about this thing. And it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about NDC, MPP. It's about all of us, civil society, media, academia, everybody, political parties, and begin to ask ourselves critical questions. What can we do to reduce the huge quantum of money that we spend every 4 years in elections? So that is the government of the argument that I was making.
Right.
And I cited examples. And I said, look, for example, JIDA. I came into office and I was directed by the president to clean up JIDA. Mind you, JIDA was set up by the previous MPP government. There were no systems in place. It was a very loose system, and people, they took advantage of it. We also, the problems were compounded. President Mahama said we should clean up the system. We started the cleanup process. And lo and behold, the people that you know supported you, funded you, most of them were the ones that you had to deal with. And I'm saying it was almost unconscionable. These are people that have invested so much in our campaign. And let me put it on record. They invest on both sides. So that's what I'm saying. It's not about NDC or MPP. They put in so much money on both sides. These are business people. They are not charitable organizations.
Which people are these, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah?
We are not talking about individuals. Please, let's not personalize individualized things. I'm talking generality. So you must understand the context. I don't want to reduce this into this Mr. A or Mr. B. If you do that, you will penalize this discussion. This is a very serious discussion. So
I know, but wouldn't it be important to start from there if we are really finding the solutions to this issue?
Listen to me. The conversation will be diverted. It will become muddy. Let's get the principles straight. When we get the principles right, then we can come back and begin to look at some of those things. But for now, it's important that we get the principles straight. Otherwise, we distort the entire conversation and make it about this or that. That's not the purpose. Okay? So, and then you are now dealing with them. You set up a committee of independent people. They are looking at it. There's audits. There's this, that. People have to pay back money and all that and all that. And then you're asking yourself, but these are the people who have also been funding your party. So how can we have a system whereby we can reduce the quantum of money that we all put into the election so that we minimize the quantum of money that we go and ask them to give us, so that at the end of the day, when they also come back and ask us to help them do things, we would have the moral courage to say, no, this cannot be done, this cannot be done. And I cited other examples. We're all in this country. When issues came out at Boston, one politician, and I admire him for his honesty, he said, look, you cannot touch this man because he brought me such amount of money. Well, you know, in this country, didn't you hear it? He was being truthful. And continuously, Auditor General's report, you keep hearing all these cases. I'm saying that part, not necessarily all the corruption, but a major part of it is because right from the beginning, ab initio, we get ourselves into a situation where we have gone to collect money, taking money from these people, and because they are business people and they need to recoup their investment, when they come and present us with proposals, we may not be completely beneficial to the country in terms of value for money. It is difficult for us to now stand our ground and say, look, this cannot happen. Okay? So that is where I'm coming from. And I'm saying that it is important that we begin to look at the systems and structures.
Right, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah.
Let's look at best practices globally. Okay? Let's look at the Scandinavian countries. There are some countries that there are limits as to the number of billboards a candidate can use, the number of adverts you can do. Let's have this is just the beginning of the conversation. Let's be honest with ourselves so that we cannot be doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect different results. You are in a country where people have to work for 5 months before they will get water. School children are lying on the floor. Pregnant women, you show the videos on your channel, have to cross water. So if we are putting so much into campaign, I'm saying that we should begin to have a conversation, honest conversation, and say, look, how can we minimize the expenditure so that it will inure to the benefit of us all?
So from what I'm understanding, if I'm to understand what you're saying, at the moment, we have not had this conversation. We have not dealt with the issue. So for the 2020 election, the NDC can expect to have, and of course, it's not just the NDC, both parties can expect to have another expensive election, which would have to depend on some businessmen to fund.
I didn't say that. If that's how you want to twist it, that's your own perspective. Well, I went to a forum. The forum was meant to discuss some of these things. The issues came up. I brought up my perspective, and that is just the beginning of the conversation. So if you reduce it to the NDC have to spend more money, then it means you haven't even begun to understand the whole thing that we are talking about. This goes beyond NDC and MPP. This goes beyond me. This is a conversation that we must have as a country. Okay? Let's have an honest conversation. Let's get input from the political parties, from civil society, from academia. We have been doing things in a particular way. We've all seen the consequences. Renewal is part of growth.
What would your proposals be, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah?
Yes.
What would your proposals be if we were to have this conversation? What would you think the real solution is?
I think it would be arrogant on my part to think that I have the solution. I don't.
Of course, but you in a bid to contribute.
The issues, yeah. And you and I know these are the issues. There are 30 million Ghanaians. There are people who are more knowledgeable than me. Okay? The academics, civil society, and let us have this conversation at various fora on radio as we are doing. Let civil society groups, this group, they've started it. Let other civil society groups take it up. Some of them have started in a way, but we need to increase the momentum. And I'm saying that one of the ways would be to look at best practices elsewhere. Because I know in some countries there is a limit as to the number of billboards you can have. There's a limit as to the number of adverts you can have on radio. There's a limit as to what you can do here, and it's all documented. That's not going to happen in a day, but we need to engage. We need to acknowledge and recognize that, look, there is a challenge, okay? And then let's begin to engage. Let's begin to talk. Then we will see if we'll put a system together, put a team together, and look at this thing fora all over the place and begin to come to a common understanding. That's my perspective.
Out of pure curiosity, you know, if we want to understand the problem, it would be good to see where and how it began. How do you think this issue of expensive party financing began in this country?
Oh, it's all about democracy. We said democracy is expensive, and so there's competition within the parties. And we haven't even begun to talk about internal contest. So that's a whole kettle of fish. You know, if we want to expand the conversation to that, we can look at that. But that is the way it is.
Was the 92 election that expensive, in your view?
All elections have been expensive. And in my view, it's been going up exponentially, if that's where you want to go.
What do you think is the motivation to put in so much on the side of the politician? You've mentioned how businessmen want to exact their pound of flesh, but what do you think is the motivation on the side of the politician to keep putting in so much to win power?
And I'm saying it's on both sides of the political divide.
Yes, of course. So I'm asking a generic question for any politician.
You have to run an election. You have to campaign. You have to travel around the country. You have to do adverts. Don't we do adverts on your stage? Don't we charge us? Radio, TV. It's not for free.
I'm asking for the motivation.
When you asked me, I said one possible solution would be to look at maybe the quantum of adverts. Can we have a regulation, for example, that you cannot do so much adverts? Maybe you can do 1-2 a day. No, these are all things that we should begin to look at.
Mr. Afriyie Ankrah, the question I was asking was that what makes it worth it for a politician to go to so much lengths to raise money to serve?
Because there's an election to be won. You are in a competitive environment. It's obvious, isn't it?
No, I'm asking that it becomes expensive at a point. I have spoken to politicians on personal levels where they complain about how running an election is so expensive. You talk about how you talk about how in your tape you talked about how it clouds your judgment sometimes when signing contracts. I'm saying, and that means it will affect your desire to serve the people. So what motivates the politician to fund an election when in the end you may not serve the people as well as you want to?
Daniel, respectfully, I must say that I'm a bit disappointed in your questions, because your posturing is like you are some ignorant person living on another planet who doesn't know what is going on. and you want to run away from the reality. And you see, these are the kinds of attitudes that make it difficult for us to deal with the problems. If you tell me that you do not know the problem, then I'll be very, very surprised. We have a problem in this country. I did not cause it. You did not cause it. It's a problem that has evolved over time. How do we deal with this problem? Let's have an honest conversation about this problem, and all of us together as Ghanaians, media people, the intellectuals, academia, civil society, let's see how best we can deal with the problem.
Right. You talk about institutional change, and this will be our final comment. You talked about institutional change. However, in a system where most of our institutions are so heavily influenced by the government in power, how realistically do you think that we can effect this change when one party would always have an advantage over the party that is not in power?
Okay, so then let's throw up our hands in the air and let's continue business as usual.
You see, I'm asking Mr. Afriyie Ankrah for someone who has a perspective from government and for someone who has a perspective from running a political party. I don't. So I'm asking what your idea is. So what do you think? How do you think we can circumvent that? Because a party will always have advantage. One party will always have money and another party will not. So how do you think we can deal with that?
So first of all, we must have the honest and difficult conversation. This is not a comfortable conversation. I've had many calls after this. Some people are happy, some are not. But that's the way it is. We must have an honest, truthful conversation, number one. Two, as we engage in civil society, academia, relevant institutions, will now begin to put in place the processes whereby we can have a look at the institutions and structures and systems that enable these things to happen. And then now the necessary reforms that we have to engage in order to bring meaningful change. So that will be my approach.
Do you think that a party in power would be motivated to go down this route?
We have to force them to. For example, if we put party financial reform, we make it an issue.
Hello, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah. We almost lost you there, but you are talking about party financing. We know that, for instance, both the large political parties, the two largest political parties, which include your party, have not even submitted audited accounts. So, yes, I mean, we talk about this, but realistically, where do we begin from? I mean, beyond the conversation, because these conversations have been had, haven't they?
Daniel, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We were in the PNDC.
Hello, Mr. Afriyie Ankrah, we are losing you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's good now.
Okay. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We were under colonial rule for many, many years. People like Nkrumah started mobilizing, and all the others. They started mobilizing. They started engaging in conversations. Some people thought it wasn't possible. Some people said independence now. Some people said independence in the nearest future. Through those conversations and engagements, there arose a certain momentum that led to independence. Come back to constitutional rule. After the PNDC, in the period of the PNDC, we started having conversations. The PNDC, being sensitive to the needs and aspirations of the people, took it upon itself to organize fora all across the country, gathered views, and that led us to the new constitutional dispensation in which we are today. So when we begin to have honest, sincere, intelligent conversations about issues, government, and put pressure on government, the government will respond. We must make them respond. So you, as a media, you have a very critical and indispensable role to play in shaping this conversation.
Right. Thank you, Elvis Afriyie Ankrah, for joining us this morning. He's a former Youth and Sports Minister, former campaign manager for the NDC, and he was sharing his thoughts on what's really the challenge, the real causes of corruption are, and how it links to financing party campaigns. Tell us what you think about the challenges that he has raised. He believes that it's time for us to have a national conversation, not to personalize it, else we may banalize the conversation. But do you think that we can really begin to talk about how to fund political parties during campaigns and remove the heavy hand of business from it? Tell us what you think on 0244-340-437. Now moving on, children are the future leaders. As such, you need to secure their future today. GT Bank is offering you the best way to do this. We are rewarding all new and existing customers who open accounts for